After his retirement from the High Court bench, Dyson Heydon became a controversial figure as the Abbott government's chosen inquisitor in the Trade Union Royal Commission. But 2 years ago, another side of Heydon was revealed when the High Court announced it had asked Dr Vivienne Thom to investigate allegations by 6 women that they had been sexually harassed by the former judge. Their allegations were believed. Chief Justice Susan Kiefel apologised to the women on behalf of the court and announced new measures to protect judges' personal staff. At the time, Dyson Heydon released a statement through his lawyers denying emphatically any allegation of sexual harassment or any offence, and, quote, any allegation of predatory behaviour or breaches of the law. The statement said Dyson Heydon apologised for any inadvertent or unintended offence caused and noted, quote, the inquiry was an internal administrative inquiry and was conducted by a public servant and not by a lawyer, judge or a tribunal member. It was conducted without having statutory powers of investigation and of administering affirmations or oaths. Like Dyson Heydon, Alex Eggerking had grand ambitions for a legal career. In fact, she had wanted to be a barrister all her life.
I did have a really strong sense of justice. I was quite taken with, the Geoffrey Robertsons of the world.
Eggerking had done extremely well at university and went to work with one of the big law firms, but she particularly had her sights set on constitutional law and applied for a prized associateship with a Justice of the High Court, usually a fast track to a stellar career. She got a job when Dyson Heydon chose her as an associate for 2011.
Yeah, it's the absolute pinnacle job for a law graduate.
What the 23-year-old Alex Eggerking wasn't to know at the time, though, was that the then 68-year-old Dyson Heydon had a history of harassing women in the legal profession, particularly a string of young associates who worked for him, according to the investigation commissioned by the High Court.
On my 3rd day of being an associate, there were drinks held in the library. The library staff put on drinks. I went back to do some more work up in chambers, in the judge's chambers. He came back upstairs after that and hung around while I finished my work.
Alex was preparing the trolley of books and materials the judge would need in court the next day. He asked her whether she had eaten and whether she would like to have dinner. Alex says Heydon had had a bit to drink, so she drove them to a restaurant in the city.
I was thrilled, to be honest. I thought this is him offering to take a personal interest in me and become my mentor. And it was perfectly professional and innocuous conversation, talking about the court, talking about the law, talking about being an associate.
On the car ride back to the Commonwealth Club, Heydon started asking if she wanted to go inside and take a look around.
So I sort of reasoned, well, nothing's happened so far. Maybe I'm overthinking this. There'll be people inside. It's a public place. I really don't know how to say no to this High Court judge who's my boss of 3 days, who's quite, intimidating and scary in the sense of powerful. And I would have to work with him for a whole year. So I remember not wanting to go inside, but I remember taking only my valuables and leaving my bag in the car and saying I would just come inside for a quick look.
But Alex says it was from this point she became much more alarmed.
And when I went to leave, he said, I'd like you to come and see my desk where I work.
Why would you want to see his desk?
I didn't. I didn't want to see his desk, and I felt at that point as though he was trying to manipulate me into a situation where I might be alone with him. I became very uncomfortable, but he was quite insistent, and he had this very quiet presence that didn't take a lot of argument, and he sort of stood there waiting for me to follow him.
She reluctantly followed.
I remember him opening the door and saying, come inside, and I went inside. I can see this burned in my brain. I can see his silhouette standing in the doorway to the next room, and I can hear his voice saying, he has quite a quiet voice, saying, "Close the door." I didn't want to close the door. Everything felt totally turned on its head. I closed the door. Once I closed the door, I could see that I was in his bedroom, and that's when I really started to panic. I felt like it was now, there's no desk there. It became so obvious that that this had crossed into an extremely unprofessional situation. I felt like I'd been manipulated into his bedroom.
She says he asked if he could get her a glass of water and turned on the cricket.
I was terrified. I felt violated. I felt manipulated. And I felt trapped. And I had a question afterwards, which is, what if I hadn't got out? And all of those feelings have stayed in my body, and they're still there. And I opened the door. I said, "I've got to go, Judge. I'll see you tomorrow." And I fled. I remember sitting in my car and just bursting into tears and wondering what on earth had just happened. I was so shocked and so confused.
The next day, shocked and upset, Alex arrived at work at the High Court and found herself in a room with her fellow associates.
I remember absolutely losing it and bursting into tears in one of the offices. It became obvious to me that morning that I was not the first female associate who had experienced something like this.
The young woman now had to contemplate what she would do next.
I thought about leaving. I thought, how on earth can I stay and work in this position with this man who I now don't respect at all, let alone feel safe around? But I also had no sense that I could leave. No one leaves a High Court associate position without questions being asked, and I wasn't ready to answer those questions. So my co-associate and I came up with strategies to manage my being in chambers and around the judge for the year.
As her year with Heydon ended, Alex had to decide what she would do next.
A lot of my fellow associates around the court were making plans to study at Oxford and Cambridge or Harvard or Columbia, to continue their path towards going to be barristers or academics or whatever it is they wanted to be. To do all of those things, you need a reference from your judge. I decided at some point during that year that I would not ever seek a reference from Dyson Heydon. I was absolutely determined that he would not get to have one iota say in who or what I was next.
Instead, Alex moved into corporate law in a team where she said she felt very safe, staying for 3 or 4 years before deciding to leave the law altogether and moving to New York with her husband, trying out a new career in media. She had a baby and the family decided to return to Australia, but her life was not as she had thought it would be.
It was all falling down around me because I was so confused why my life didn't look anything like how I'd hoped to, and why I couldn't seem to get it back on track.
It was around this time she was approached by one of the other complainants and eventually by Dr. Vivian Tom. Eggerking, like all good lawyers, had written a contemporary account of what had happened to her. She handed this to Tom's inquiry, but the full impact of what had happened to her really only became apparent when she became involved in the bid by some of the women for compensation and was eventually diagnosed with PTSD by a forensic psychiatrist. Did you look at your 23-year-old self and be angry for that person?
I was devastated for her. I was so sorry for that girl, that young woman. I was angry at how vulnerable she was and how unable she was to reckon with what happened, how she had to protect herself to make it through that year.
One of the reasons Alex Eggerking says she wants to speak out now is the hope it will help others know they can move beyond such traumas.
My message to other people who've been harassed is, you matter. What happened to you matters. It's possible for you to move through the shame and the silence and the feelings of fear and voicelessness and reconnect with yourself. Again, because that is the most important thing. It is possible to hold people to account, though it's incredibly bloody hard and incredibly draining.
So is there anything that you'd like to say to Dyson Heydon?
There is so much that I would like to say to Dyson Heydon. Dyson, you ruined my career. You destroyed my love for the law. You destroyed my faith in legal institutions and the legal profession. You made me feel viscerally unsafe on my third day of working for you. You made me feel worthless. You treated me like I was an object that you could use when you wanted to, with impunity. You don't deserve to have an AC. You don't deserve to have a practicing certificate. What I also want to say is that you didn't get away with it. Strong, courageous, vulnerable, bloody determined women stood up and said, "That's enough. This is what happened to me and you won't get away with it."
Okay.
I think that's what I wanted to say.
Hi, I'm Lee Sales. Thanks for watching this story. If you'd like to watch more of 730's stories, they are on the left of your screen. And tap on the button below to subscribe and get the latest from ABC News.